Again, this wouldn't be possible without our sponsors, so a bit of a shout out to those guys. The Peaky team for pushing it along and making it happen. Really wouldn't have been possible without everyone here tonight, going to grab pizzas, filling up drinks, all of those sorts of things. Shout out to those guys for doing that. The National Maritime Museum kindly let us use the venue for the evening. It does feel like a bit of an exclusive. I have been asked to say that it's not as pretty as it usually is, so ignore the machinery, the forklifts and whatever else that's dotted around. What a space to be able to hold an event, so we feel quite lucky to have that. And then St Ives Brewery for chucking us a load of beers keeping everyone topped up and hydrated with their tasty drinks. I did actually try their potato and rosemary wheat beer the other day. Sounds weird, tastes like what it says, but it's actually really nice. It's really bloody good. So keep an eye out for that. Potato and rosemary beer, who would have thought it? On to our amazing speaker, who is Bronwen of Finisterre, their Chief Marketing Officer, who's going to be talking all around sustainability, creativity and inclusivity driving the bottom line. So if we could all give Bronwen a round of applause. And I'll hand over the microphone.
Hi guys, are we having fun so far? Yes, excellent. Is everyone here from Cornwall? Yes. Anyone not from Cornwall? Okay, good. Some brave souls putting their hands up. Definitely not from Devon. Definitely not. I've learnt that. I'm Bronwen. I am lucky enough to be the CMO at Finisterre, which is based just up on the north coast in St Agnes. You may be able to tell from my accent that I'm not Cornish. I'm Canadian, but I've lived over here for 20 years. And I'm lucky enough to call currently London my home, but in the next year moving down to the southwest. So I'm so excited, and tonight's just so great because it's brilliant to get trapped in London and the network there, and actually it's really beautiful to come down and see that there's all this creativity and amazing things happening. So thank you for welcoming me here. And I'm here to talk, it's actually not at all about me, it's all about Finisterre and how, in particular, in these turbulent times. Actually, who's from a brand and who's from an agency? So brand? Okay. Or business, and agency or freelance. Okay, so slightly tipping over into agency side, but a nice mix. So it's been a year, hasn't it? It has been 3 years. It is just every year when we think we're getting used to what the new normal is, the new normal changes entirely. And so the point of this talk is to hopefully try and inspire you that through sustainability, creativity, and inclusivity, you can still drive the bottom line, especially in a cost of living crisis. This was what I was meant to say, what I just said. So it's been stormy, and that was a slide to illustrate the storm, but we can persevere and survive it. So first of all, does everybody here know who Finisterre is? Anyone doesn't? In case you don't know, I'll be very brief, but started by this amazing guy, Tommy Kay, 20 years ago this year. He saw this gap in the market around surf because he loved to surf. He loved being in the water, but his version of surf was not at all the type of surf that he saw in the surf magazines. That was all about board shorts and bikinis and flip-flops and quite sexy. And there he was sort of getting out of the ocean. It was not at all sexy. He was entirely frozen. There wasn't any product catering to this cold water surf. And there he was bobbing out at sea just off of the coast of St Agnes and thought, I can't be the only one, despite probably being the only one in the lineup at that time. He was thinking there's got to be other people like me who want a brand that speak to this lifestyle, but also that do so without costing the earth. And this idea of sustainability has been there right from the start. The fleece he's wearing, retailed at 100 quid. That was back in 2003. It was really expensive. It was made with recycled polyester. That was really hard to find at the time. But he found the hypocrisy of the surf industry profiteering off of materials that inherently hurt the ocean, which was where surf, it was where the joy was from. And he thought, we can't have an industry killing the very thing that brings us so much joy and brings us so much purpose. And so he set out to build a brand that had sustainability from the get-go. And he hasn't faltered in that commitment, although he does have substantially less hair now. But we still actually see some of those fleeces bobbing about, so they're incredibly robust and sturdy. And we've had some highs and lows. We didn't live through this storm, but we have lived through several storms. We've lived through the rise of online. So Finisterre started as a 3-page website in 2003. There was no such thing as D2C. Back then it was all about retail and bricks and mortar, and then there he was with this. You can actually find the website you can like Google something in the deep web and go back and see it, and it's quite the thing to observe. It belongs in a museum, actually. But suddenly there was a proliferation as the growth of the internet came along, and other brands were able to enter the space without the previous barriers. Then he lived through the 08-09 recession. I mean, that wiped off a vast number of brands that were in the same space trying to do the same thing, lived through that. Lived through the explosion of D2C. So Shopify and Canva just removing all those barriers that used to exist for brands opening and coming into Finisterre's space, we got through. And then most recently, we've so far lived through Trustonomics, I believe is the expression that we're in right now. COVID was a high, so that was a good thing for us. But we couldn't have predicted it, just like Michael Fish. So, storytelling. I talk about creativity of driving the bottom line. Storytelling has been a pivotal part of the brand right from the early days. Tom talks a lot even now about like how are we stirring people's souls? How are we creating a deeper connection? How do we get that flutter in the heart? How do we get the hairs lifting on people's arms? Like, it can't just be about product. It's got to be about something bigger than that. This was a shoot from a number of years ago with tents, which are so photogenic, but an absolute bastard to put up, and quite flammable. And it was as cold as it looks in that photo. And there these guys were, I believe it was the Outer Hebrides. Larry's going to fact check me on everything. They just camped out for 6 days, didn't know when the surf was going to come, but it was looking pretty good in the forecast. Just a handful of them. There was no hair and makeup. There was no fixer. There was no catering. It was, let's go camping in the Swedish army tent, and we'll stay there until the swell arrives, and we'll capture some photos, and hopefully we'll get some great imagery out of the back of it. One night it was so cold that they actually had to set up a rotation to make sure that the fire didn't go out. But then they drank too much whiskey and they all passed out, and somebody eventually woke up in his underpants, and flames was coming out of the fire thing, and then they were all outside on the beach in their underpants in the middle of the night, stomping out on the coals, only to discover that then the fire was out and they were frozen for the remainder of the evening. So, but then we get an image like this, and I am proud to say that our health and safety on shoots has improved dramatically since then. But our commitment and desire to telling beautiful stories through photography, videography, written word still has never waned. I'm not going to go through this entire slide, but this slide is to talk about how this commitment to sustainability, I spoke about it from the get-go, this idea of battling the hypocrisy of the surf industry. It has been a commitment through, and that's through all those storms as well. So, you know, in 2008, 2009, when the economy was crashing, we launched a repairs service. I mean, you can't make money from repairs. We still don't make money from repairs, but it was this commitment of we need to stand by our product. Tom was getting jackets sent back to him going, hey mate, can you fix this for me? And so there was this idea of, well, we can employ locals who have this craftsmanship, who have the skill that is sadly on a decline, and we can extend the usable life of this product, which has got to be a good thing for both the planet and for us. So let's start a repairs service. And I've got the recent figure, but to this date, we've extended the usable life over 9,200 garments. And through our resale platform, which we launched 3 years ago, we have resold over 3,500 garments. And so that's all product that could have ended up in landfill and be adding to the hideous mountains that we can see. Sadly, not in the global north. Usually they're sent to the global south. So incredible commitment. I'm not going to go into any more of them because I actually pull out a few. But the commitment across, regardless of what the economy's been throwing our way, the commitment to sustainability hasn't changed. This is great because this is Leslie Pryor. Leslie is the owner of the last superfine British merino flock of sheep in the UK. And who here knew that we even had merino wool production in the UK? I'm exposing myself as not a shepherd. You knew. So we had one person that knew. So where does merino usually come from? Pop quiz. New Zealand, yeah. It comes from miles away. But Leslie has built this incredible flock. She really believed that the UK can be a merino producing country, which is hard because you usually need quite nice weather. You wouldn't find them in the Scottish Highlands. They do live down here in the southwest. But the flock at the time only had 28 sheep, and that wasn't enough to be commercially viable. We found out about it and committed to Leslie that if she grew the flock, we would buy the wool when it got to a commercial level and we'd bring it to market. It took 5 years before the first commercial collection actually came. The flock is now over 300, and every year we produce the Beaumont jumper. It sells for way more than our normal jumpers, and it sells out practically before we can even bring it to market. Just this last year, thanks to Brexit, Leslie wasn't able to shear the sheep on time because there's fewer shearers, people who shear in the market. And so when the sheep were eventually sheared, it had a lot of plant matter in it. It had lots of grass and other plant matter. So it could have gone to waste. It was actually, she was going to put it back out into the field because that's what a lot of wool gets used for. But we came and we chatted to her and we were able to turn them into a beautiful felt slipper. And they launched just over 24 hours ago and sold out in less than 20 hours. And that's a 90 quid merino slipper. Like, that's not just sort of your impulse buy. Like, that's a considered purchase. And what was incredible is our customers know us and trust us, and they love the story about Leslie and they believe in British merino. It would have been easier to just go and get New Zealand merino and gone, we could still do the Beaumont jumper and then we'll still have a merino jumper, but we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to let Leslie down and we didn't want to sacrifice our integrity. Lived and loved. I think I gave you the figures earlier, but way before it was fashionable to have a resale and a repairs business, we invested in it, and we have a lovely team. It's based up in St. Agnes, and we now have a repair service out of our Bristol store. You can bring in your garment. It doesn't matter how old it is. It doesn't matter what you've done to it. We'll patch it for you. We'll darn it for you. We'll reproof it. We'll fix zippers. I think it's become a little bit of a point of pride even. Like, we sometimes get jackets sent in and it's like, I don't think you need a patch on this, but somebody wants the patch to look quite hardcore. But no judging. But it's incredible, this commitment to the most sustainable product is the one you already own. We all have enough product. We just need to extend the life of it. Ulex, natural rubber. So who here owns a wetsuit? Okay, most of you. Who here owns a Ulex wetsuit? Well done, you get a gold star. So everybody else's wetsuit is made of neoprene. Does anyone know where neoprene comes from? What the base? You're afraid so, oh God, the shame. I'm just not the shame stick. No, I mean, neoprene is a petrochemical. And so it comes from that dark sludge that we are killing the planet, getting out of the earth. Not only that, so it has a massive carbon footprint. I mean, questionable how much we should have that against our bare skin. But not only that, in recent years, we're discovering the human cost of the chloroprene production. And chloroprene is the chemical component that becomes commercially facing neoprene. It's produced out of very big chemical factories. The majority of them are in areas that are surrounded by impoverished communities. Often people of color living nearby. There's one in particular in Louisiana in an area called Cancer Alley, where the inhabitants, who are 90% black, have a cancer rate that is 50 times higher than the national average. How that continues to operate in a Western democratic society is baffling, but it does. And even worse, the company Denka, who are producing the chloroprene, use surfing as a way to market and make their image look good. So they're taking this image of surfing, of this natural, beautiful, ocean-based activity, to greenwash themselves, whilst at the same time producing a component that's killing the local inhabitants, as well as using petroleum as a base. So neoprene is terrible, and it's indestructible. It's used to line landfill. Like you probably know, because you probably have lots of wetsuits that you don't know what to do with because they get so old. And anyway, a few years ago, the good guys over at Patagonia worked with this incredible company called Ulex, who do a lot of development around natural rubber. And they developed a natural rubber that was flexible enough and warm enough to work in wetsuits. 3 years ago, we got on board as well. We are now entirely neoprene free, so we don't have any neoprene anywhere across our range, which is a big deal because actually a lot of neoprene is hidden. It's in things like your backpack padding. The vast majority of neoprene is actually in your car, but neoprene is sort of insidious, and anywhere you feel anything that's sort of soft and squishy will often have neoprene hidden behind it, and it's still in the vast majority of wetsuits. It's not commercially viable. We'd be selling a lot more wetsuits if we were selling neoprene wetsuits, but we refuse to sacrifice our integrity, and we believe that if we can get more people choosing Ulex, whether it's our suits or anybody else's Ulex suits, eventually we'll get to the scale where the pricing will be able to come down, and soon we'll see the eradication of neoprene. C7. I mean, Larry should really talk about C7. This was his idea. But do you guys remember when that lovely super spreader event G7 was hosted down this way? I think it was probably like this black mark on the time. I mean, did anybody go? Did anybody have a great time? No, okay. So part of the problem, as Larry tells me, is it came down here, it was this huge big deal, but it was behind closed doors, and there was no ocean-centric conversation, despite the fact that we're an island nation, and I think there was cruise boats everywhere, and people were bobbing in the sea. I mean, you couldn't have been more connected to the sea, and yet no one was discussing the ocean, and nobody else was allowed in or to glean any learning from it. And so we hijacked it and created C7, thank you to Larry, and it was an ocean activist camp. So it was well, if they're not going to talk about the ocean and how we can save it, we're going to do that. And we produced a series of podcasts. We attracted over 5,000 people into the brand through it. And the best part is that 3 years on, they have a higher LTV than our test group, who were customers that we also acquired at the same time. So activist content, you bring them in, you make their lives, you make the content meaningful, and it drives the bottom line. Finisterre Foundation. So in 2001, Tom started the Finisterre Foundation together with his wife, Philippa. As anyone who works in a purpose-driven brand will know, you get a lot of requests for, can you support this, or can you do this? And Tom and Philippa knew that they wanted to do something that was bigger than them and bigger than Finisterre, but they were also overwhelmed by the sheer number of requests coming in, and where could they have impact, but also where did they have credibility to have impact? And something that was really close to their hearts was around removing barriers of access to the ocean. So it may feel less obvious to those of us who are lucky enough to live down here, and I can see everybody's more or less able-bodied. Everybody here has probably grown up in a family where lessons were something that we all just did, and culturally, and from a religious background, and all of these things that we just take for granted meant that we've been able to access the ocean in a really easy way. But that just isn't the case for so many people. And so the Finisterre Foundation is the CIC, and it was founded to help remove these barriers. It launched with a project called the Wetsuit Project, which is where we'll take wetsuits and we'll do the adaptations required for anybody to be able to get in one. Because even if you're able-bodied and young and strong, it is really hard to get in and out of a wetsuit, let alone when your hands are frozen. But if you have any kind of physical disability, sensorial issues, we have a lot of people coming through who are perhaps transitioning, and they're finding that as their body is changing, they're struggling to find a product that works for them. We'll take your wetsuit and we'll adapt it to you, custom adaptation, and it's given to you for free for life. To date, we have adapted over 100 wetsuits, which may not actually sound like a lot, but each zip costs 50 quid, and they take about 3.5 weeks to adapt. So we work with the guys at Bodyline, just up in Cornwall, or up on the coast, and it's an incredible project, but also these are custom-made wetsuits. They're not just sort of mass-produced adaptations. So thanks to Blue Friday, which we've just come through, so we do anti-Black Friday, we don't discount, and over the last weekend, we did £2 from every order. We've just raised an additional £10,000 that's going to go out. We have an amazing wait list of people wanting their wetsuits adapted, and we'll be able to charge through that together with our friends at Bodyline. We also did a project a few years ago called the Sea Suit, which came out of one of our ambassadors spending time in Iran and noticing that there was barriers for women there accessing the ocean, and they were having to wear wetsuits in 30-degree temperature, or just simply not accessing the ocean at all. And so we created this shapeless by on purpose, and together also with a really clever pattern to help sort of bring modesty considerations in, but also if perhaps people want to hide certain parts of their body, not have certain parts that were visible, the C-suit catered for all of that, together with hijabs. And we've given away 150 of them. We have a buy one, get one, but equally you can submit an application through to the Finisterre Foundation and we'll send you a C-suit and hijab. There's the C-suit. That's but just seeing the picture is better than I was trying to explain. And then International Women's Day. So last year, we were talking a lot, IWD was coming up, and we were talking a lot about women in surf and the challenges with the surf industry around overly masculine, perhaps at times toxic masculine, barriers of women feeling othered or overly sexualized, certainly within the surf industry. And we thought, how can we actually start changing the narrative? And so we put out a campaign that was, the creatives were women, the film editor was woman, it was narrated by a woman, the copywriter was a woman, because so often you get these female campaigns where the entire, and those from you from the creative agencies will probably know, we have a problem in the creative industry where it is still vast majority men producing all of these amazing stories. And so we were like, well, that can't be. This has to be not just a female-centered story of changing the narrative of women in surf, but the whole thing actually has to be produced by women. On top of that, and you'll see a video from IWD in a minute, but on top of that, we also realized that part of the lack of female-centered content within the industry is that there aren't enough female filmmakers. And so we did a competition. It was open to anyone. You didn't have to be professional, but if you submitted your film pitch, we would give the winning pitch up to £5,000 to go away and make that film. So we had over 50 applicants. We had like 8 for the first 3 weeks, and then 24 hours before the deadline, they all came in, and we were all like, oh, thank God. We were afraid it was going to be a complete failure. But no, it was incredible. And the stories, I mean, we were weeping, we were laughing, just reading the pitches. We could have made at least over half of them. It was so beautiful. We chose one, an incredible young woman named Leah Rustamji. She filmed it. It's called The Granny Grommets. It's all about these incredible women in Albany, Australia. You have to be over 60 to join. And they are refusing to back down, refusing to be told that as you age, they are no longer relevant and they are no longer seen. And they are changing the narrative of both women in surf, but older women in surf. And this past weekend, we saw the world premiere at the London Surf Film Festival. And I was there for most of the nights, and it was the film of the festival. People were hooting and hollering, and it was a story. You could just see it captured people in their heart. First of all, everybody wants to be a granny grommet, but they've got a wait list. But also, it was just this idea of like, surfing doesn't have to be about the biggest wave. It doesn't have to be about the gnarliest conditions. Actually, for so many of us, surfing is about that connection to the ocean and connection to the community around it. We're going to do it again this year, and we've got big goals, and I think just watch this space for Leah. She's an incredible young filmmaker. So what does this all mean, and how can it help you? Never waste a good recession. I believe this is attributed to Angela Ahrendts, who, if you don't know, she was CEO at Burberry when Burberry went from 1 to 4 billion, and most recently has been at Apple for the last decade. And she was my boss when I was at Burberry during the 2008-09 recession, and things were looking dire, especially in luxury fashion. And she said, we're not going to waste this. We're going to turn this into opportunity. And it was so refreshing. So what can we do to take advantage of, I don't believe it's formally called a recession that we're in right now, but it's not all roses, is it? No. So top 3 tips. Measure correctly, scale through a niche, and grow from within. So first, I'm like kind of embarrassed of this one, Ben, because of peaky digital. I'm exposing myself as a not very data-driven performance marketer. I am not. So pop quiz. I'm going to play 2 ads, and you're going to tell me which of the 2 was most successful. So let's hope this works. First one.
We are strong, not delicate. We are loading boards in the dark. We know the tides and the charts, considering wind, swell, seconds. Putting on damps up, gloves on, battle scars. We are joining the lineup, finding a beat, paddling hard for the shoulder. Need a push? No thanks. We ride and we fall. We have no fear of depths or preconceptions. Alone or together, this is where we belong. We are women of the sea.
And then add 2. So who thinks the first ad was most successful? And who thinks the second ad was most successful? You're all wrong. They were both successful because it just matters on how you measure success. So, I mean, I hold my hands up and say I may have missed the trend here in that through performance marketing, you should have different KPIs, but I was certainly guilty of living within a marketing industry that didn't understand the difference of ROAS versus CAC versus ROI versus thumb stop ratio versus hold rate. And I have sat in boardrooms where I've been trying to justify creative spend for something that's beautiful and brand building and not known how to say how it was successful in a measurable way, which is why we've, for so often, especially up until iOS, we were just bombarded with messages that were completely bottom of the funnel, all about buy, and everybody was neglecting brand building, and they were neglecting investing in like the long run and being something bigger than just your product. So the first ad was all about hold rate and thumb stop ratio. So how many people can we actually get their thumb to stop? And then those people who stop, how many actually watch all the way through? It wasn't about immediate ROI. It was, can we create something that actually gets people's attention? From there, we were then able to drive them to the website. Then next thing you know, we get a traffic metric. That's lovely. Suddenly we can start retargeting them, putting them into a different campaign. I feel embarrassed saying this in front of you, Ben. You're probably like, yeah, obviously. Where the second ad was about ROI, or ROAS. This was about, okay, this is shop now. We want people to click through. They've seen the beautiful ad. We know they've interacted with us. They've gone onto our website and looked at a few pieces of product. Now let's show them a really beautiful product film. And like that should be the one that's doing that hard work on conversion. But that one isn't less successful because it didn't convert straight away. So if you're in boardrooms or if you're in meetings and your FD or your board are sort of pushing you on your metrics, make sure you're using the right ones and make sure you're educating them in why they're the right ones. Okay, there. So make sure your measure of success is consumer focused, not sales focused. So we know our customers, they're not going to buy the first time they see that ad. You're taking them on a journey. You need to take them on that journey. Also, make sure that you are counting your customers and not just counting the revenue. So are your net customer numbers actually growing, or are they being masked? Is your revenue hiding actually a decline in your customer numbers? So having this customer or consumer focus, being obsessed about where are they in the journey, but also how many of them are we actually getting to see that, bringing through, how leaky is our bucket? That's going to be how you're able to make sure that your marketing is really working across the full funnel, but also that you can hold your own in any meetings with the finance. Finance terrorists. God, I don't know if anyone else. We've got a lovely FD, but I've had terrible FDs before, and I've lived to tell the tale. Scale through a niche. It is so easy, especially in an economic downturn, to just go, we need anyone who is in the market to consider us. We need the most bland message because it needs to be accessible to all. And if we do that, eventually enough people will come through that we don't go out of business. But the problem is you're competing in a world full of attention. People it's fleeting. No longer are you forcing them through Channel 4 to sit and watch your 30-second TVC followed by 2 10-second bumpers later on. Like, you've got to have a point of view. We were talking on the car ride down, a podcast I was listening to recently that's talked about how the decrease in religious-based faith has opened up consumers looking towards brand and celebrity as a beacon for values and a belief system. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's interesting how people want brands to stand for something. They want brands to help them evaluate whether or not they're still living a life that they consider to be a good one or a bad one. They want brands to challenge their thinking and go, hang on, do I agree with that? Do I want to learn more about that? Should I be aware of that? Like, focus on your niche. You're not going to win at everything. And the worst thing you can do is mean nothing to everybody. And then growth starts within. I've sat in 20 years of trade meetings on Mondays, and the number of times we've sat there going, oh, it's not quite as good as we want. What should we do? Should we increase spend in bottom of the funnel, usually? Or should we do another, back in the day, it was like, should we do another DPS in Vogue? Or, I don't know, get a radio campaign going. Very rarely are those trade discussions going, are our people happy? Are they engaged? Have we listened to them recently? Have we brought them together? Do we feel like they're loving their life right now and loving their jobs? But if your growth strategy isn't based around your people and making sure that they are showing up every day fully energized, that they're taken care of, that they're treated as full, beautifully flawed human beings on a development journey, then you are missing an absolute trick. The best organizations I've ever worked in have been ones that have had people at the heart of their growth strategy. So if that isn't where you're currently at, speak to your HR people, speak to your CEO, and make the case for growth starting with your people. That's it. Any questions?
I work for FlexiHex. We just finished our investor round, so it's really exciting. We got new investors on board. So I was wondering if you ever get challenged by your investors on maybe spending money in other parts of the business where you should be where they think you could be getting more margin and more profit.
Yeah, we've done 2 crowd raises, and so we have over 5,000, Ellie, over 5,000 some very vocal, some never talk to us at all. But we just recently did a Zoom call with our crowd investors, and the questions are all over the place. Somebody asked us, like, what brand toilet paper do you use, and is it sustainable? And it's like, yes, it is. And yeah, they question us. And to be honest, our board challenge us all the time, going, are we growing fast enough? Are we too risky? Do we need to de-risk, especially recently? Actually, no, I think we need to be growing faster. So how much are you spending? We talk a lot about how much are we spending on marketing versus revenue, and is that the right ratio? And especially when we're expanding to new markets, is that the right ratio? And I mean, the best thing usually is just to have your FD on board and be really aligned with them. We're lucky in that we have a great FD. She's, I think, literally in labor right now. She was on the call earlier and she's like, I gotta go. and she's 40 weeks pregnant, so there might be a new human happening right now. But we've got a great mat leave cover. And what's brilliant about them is that they get marketing. And I think it's really challenging when you have a board or investors that don't understand things like investing in brand and investing in top of funnel. But, marketing is internal as well. So you've got to marketing. And so it's taking them on the journey, helping them understand, asking them questions like, well, when was the last time you bought something and what was your journey to buying that? Like, was it through a Facebook ad or was it through somebody told you? And help them understand the complexity of the human psyche as well. And know your numbers. I mean, I did not know my numbers for many years and hid behind in big organizations where I didn't have to be honest, and then got my ass served to me when I started a job where I needed to know numbers and was like, holy, I can't believe I didn't know any of this. And so you've got to be able to speak to the 50-50 of the job, the number side and the creativity.
I was just wondering if you have any tips, and this is probably quite a personal one, but if you have any tips for being a woman in the marketing industry, because I know it's something that is quite a struggle for a lot of people. So.
Well, I mean, the reason I'm standing here is because I spent a lot of time going, patriarchy and no diversity in marketing. And then I realized, I was like, well, I'm a woman in the industry, and if I'm not putting my hand up when opportunities come along, then I'm just contributing to the problem. So, I mean, tips, if it's toxic, get out. You can't, if from the start, if from the top, if they're not championing equality and if they're not doing the work, it is not on you to educate them and to give that labor for free. So find some place. Like, I'm so lucky, Tom Kay is like the biggest feminist I know. It's brilliant. Sometimes he's schooling me and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. I will own my power, Tom. So like find the people that are there and willing to do the labor. There's no such thing as a perfect parent either. There's also no such thing as a perfect or I think so much of the challenge has been an expectation of women being parents too. So regardless of what your path is, just know that there's not one route to follow, and forgive yourself. Like, I went on my first mat leave thinking, oh, I'm going to have 12 months. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to get really good at yoga. And like 3 months in, I was having a breakdown, and 8 months I was back at work. And on my second mat leave, I was COVID. And 4 months in, I was back at work because I was like, I'm a better mom when I'm working. And that was what worked for me. It's going to be different for everyone. And I'd say, like, champion the young women. I've also encountered, sadly, a lot of women who have broken through and gotten to the top, and done so by having to emulate a lot of masculine qualities that also, for the record, hold back men as well, and haven't been willing to like put their hand down and help the women up behind them. So like, look around you for the women nearby that need mentorship. Hell, the men nearby that need mentorship and who also don't thrive under the patriarchy, because like, top tip, none of us do. So make sure you're in the right environment. Red flags if you're having to do all the labor. Let go of any expectations and look around you to see who else you can lift up.